Do not buy properties off the plan. If you do this as a property investor, you are only setting yourself up to fail. In this video today, I'm going to take you through the reasons as to why I think you should steer clear of committing to any purchase that is either needing to go through construction, that hasn't yet been brought into existence, and that can potentially cost you years of time while that property has to grow enough in value for you to even recover your purchase price. My name is Michael Timmins and I've been investing for the last 13 years. Not only that, I started off in doing small scale real estate strategies, particularly subdivisions and splitters. That allowed me to build up my platform of 1.2 million in equity within the first couple of years, which then set me up to deliver over $170 million of real estate deals in the last 6 years alone. So when I say this, what I really mean is that you are better off to avoid anything that doesn't have a land component. So when we're buying off the plan, essentially what we're doing is we're committing to a future purchase of something that yet doesn't exist. So generally how this works is that a developer will go in and buy a parcel of land that has got the potential for a higher and better use. Now this might be a brownfield infill land block of land that could be potentially townhouses, it could be apartments, but effectively then they go through the process of getting what we call a DA, a development approval. Now that development approval allows the developer to go in and essentially start to document their project to build whatever it is that they've got a permit from the local council to build. Okay, so if that's say 30 odd apartments, they've now got the permission from the council to go to the next level, which is then getting a building approval to deliver that product. So in order to meet the financial institutions prerequisites, effectively, if that's what you want to call it, then often what needs to occur is some pre-sales. So the lender effectively says to the developer, yeah, sure, we're happy to provide you the funding to build your building, but you'll need to bring us some signals from the market that there is actually demand for this product that you're creating. So what happens then is the developer goes out and spends an absolute small fortune building their marketing campaign, putting all their collateral and their brochures and these very expensive renders together. I should know, we build these buildings. And what they then do is list these properties on the market. They may even spend some money putting together a display suite so that these purchasers and prospects can come into the display suite and see and touch and feel some of the product, whether that be kitchens, bathrooms, the material selections, mood boards, those sorts of things. They can then come into a space where that sales transaction can occur. And then from there, effectively, some of those prospects that put their hand up and say, hey, we're interested, will sign a contract of sale, which is called an off-the-plan contract, to say, you know what, when these are built and they're completed, I'll be there ready to settle on that property. So from there, once you've signed the contract, you then also have to put up a deposit. Now that deposit could be in the way of a 5% or 10% deposit of the purchase price, and that gets locked away in a solicitor's trust account that's then earning interest as it sits in there in term deposit waiting for the settlement date. So a couple of things in that. First and foremost, what it does is it takes you out of the market. So if that 10% deposit is all that you had to put into a property purchase, well, that's now gone and a lot of the control is now out of your hands. So these purchase contracts, they can sometimes protect the developer to deliver that product for up to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So essentially, if you change your mind within 24 months or 36 months and decide, hey, we would just want to get our deposit back and we want to go and buy something else, you effectively can't break that contract because the developer's got what's called a sunset clause within those off-the-plan contracts, which protects them to deliver the product in that time frame. And if they do, well, then essentially, then you have to settle on that product once it's completed. So it takes you out of the game. You're on the sidelines having to wait for the developer and the builder to then go and build this product and deliver it for you. The market can do many things during that period of time. The market can go up, the market can go down, the market might just trend sideways. But let's say, for instance, the market goes backwards in that period of time. You're still on the hook to settle on that end product once it's been completed and delivered, even if the purchase price is higher than the valuation that comes in on completion. Now imagine that. Imagine being in a position where you have to fork out more than you had first anticipated because the value of the property isn't at the level that you committed to buy it. And that's not a rare occurrence. This can happen all the time, particularly if the sale price has been inflated to cover all of the escalated costs to deliver that product. Now that could include marketing costs, it could include marketing fees, project marketing fees, commissions, the cost of delivering the product, which might have escalated in the time that you've paid for it and committed to buy it. There's so many things. The market could have just dropped in price. There's so many things that could have happened in such a long period of time, so over the period of 2 to 5 years, that could affect the end value of that product. So you don't want to be at the mercy of what happens in the market. At least if you buy a property today, let's call it a traditional established home on a parcel of land, you buy it today and you settle it in 3 months or 6 months, at least that short window of time, you know relatively the market's not going to do too much in that period of time. Touch wood. So if something happens to that property's value during the period of ownership, well, hopefully you've got some rental income that's coming through from that property, which can kind of smooth out the edges. But that's not always the way. The other thing that can occur once you've even settled on the property, let's say for instance, you've bought a townhouse in a mix of 15 other townhouses. Let's say for instance, one of the townhouses in that complex needs to be fire sold because the couple that bought it are going through a divorce and a separation. And so they hate each other, their lawyers are involved, they're at each other's throats, and they just need to get rid of any assets that they've got within their portfolio so that they can just cash in, liquidate, and part ways. They might just put that property on the market and just take whatever they can get for it. And let's say, for instance, that townhouse is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car townhouse. It's exactly the same as the one that you've bought, but they fire sell it for $100,000 less than the property's actually worth. Well, guess what? Now when the valuer comes through to value your property, they're going to take that recent sale as a comparison sale and then apply that sale to the value of your property. So even though your property could be seen to be worth $100,000 more, because the valuer's got a hard comparative sale next door or within the complex, you've lost $100,000 of your equity and completely outside of your control. Now, you do not want to be in that position. One of the other reasons why I do not like investors buying off the plan, whether that's apartments or townhouses, is because there's no land component, right? Buildings depreciate while land appreciates. So what would you prefer to own more of? Of course, you would want to have more land holdings. Land holdings is the scarce resource that speculators effectively push up the price of over time. It's like gold. There's only so much gold that the earth has got and that has been excavated out of the earth and has been brought into the economy. And so that's the reason why the gold price continues to climb, is because there's only so much of it to go around. So as demand builds for gold, so too does the price. And land is no different. And so that's the reason why land on the fringe of CBDs is so popular and it continues to go up over time. That's why land on the outskirts of, say, urban growth corridors tends to underperform for a long period of time because there's so much land still to come and to be brought onto the market. And so what you want to be doing is positioning your portfolio with land holdings that is going to grow over time and appreciate, even though the buildings on that land may be depreciating over time. Now, you'll get the depreciation benefits of those buildings in your portfolio if you can depreciate them through either your tax returns or through your entities and structures that you buy them in. But ultimately, when you are buying an apartment or you're buying a townhouse, you don't have a land component. You might have exclusive use to some land in the form of a courtyard, or might have a balcony, but that's not land. But that land does not belong to you. It does not sit on your title. But most importantly, there's no future value that you can create from that land by then going in and, say, adding value value to the property in the form of a subdivision or a strata title or cutting that land up into multiple blocks. That's where the real value in land comes from, is that over time, that land use changes, more people move into the area, the demand picks up, and so what used to be, say, 1 block of land could potentially be now 4 blocks of land or 5 blocks of land. That's where the value generation comes from when you own real estate. And so you're much better off to be going in and purchasing land, best case with an established home and established market, not in the greenfield locations, because ultimately the demand for that type of land is going to be manipulated. See one of my other videos there, why you don't buy house and land packages as an investor. There's a very specific need in the market for apartments and for townhouses and for house and lands. Now, I often say that these are great purchases for people that are entering the market as owner-occupiers. Generally speaking, it's a great way to get a foothold in the market, to get in on the property ladder and to start to build from there. But if you're a property investor, effectively you're investing for 2 main reasons, and that is cash flow and you're investing for growth. And so you've got to work out what you're purchasing it for initially. Is it for growth or is it for cash flow, or maybe a combination of both? But generally speaking, your growth is going to be prohibited, or it's going to be held back when you're buying an apartment or you're buying a townhouse. And that's simply because you are only relying on the population to increase in that market and the demand for housing to increase. Not because there's this underlying land content that is growing in value over time, because developers are wanting to buy in, they're wanting to develop, create product. There's all of those reasons which really push up the prices. This is probably an extreme example here. This is a guy that was filmed on A Current Affair a number of years ago, and he was very disappointed because he bought into a house and land contract, or an off-the-plan contract, to effectively buy a duplex, one side of a duplex. Now, the builder cheekily went ahead and off the plan contract went and built one side of the duplex, and then on completion handed the keys over and said, okay, here's your duplex, it's ready. And he's sort of sitting there thinking, well, hang on a minute, where's the rest of it? And so this poor guy and his family, they're embarrassed to have any of their family and friends over because they're living in one half of the house. Now, you don't want to get caught up in that type of situation, not literally, but in the context of there's builder risk that comes with this. There's insolvency risk. You're relying on the fact that a builder is going to have to deliver this product, and that's over a number of years that's going to have to occur. Now, we've just seen what's happened in the last few years as a bit of a wash up out of COVID, that there's been builder insolvencies all over the place. Now, just because you're not the one contracting the builder doesn't mean that you are completely removed from the risk. What it means is that your contract and your deposit is tied up in this project that has got builder risk associated to it. Okay, so many things have to go well in order for you to get to the finish line and be able to settle on the product that you had dreamed and hoped it would be. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to have defects. It's not going to have issues, over the next number of years that you're going to own it, that there's not going to be waterproofing issues with balconies and, cracking walls and structural movements and everything like that. In a lot of cases, when these properties are handed over, it's kind of like everybody just wipes their hands and removes responsibility. So you don't want to get swept up in that. We mentioned the sunset clauses, so being held to those sunset clauses and what that typically means for your equity or your cash that you've now parked in somebody else's trust account. So it then has an opportunity cost because you're relying on that money to then sit there and hopefully grow. Because look, sometimes in some cases, you put a deposit down, you buy well, and then that property price appreciates over a period of time. And then when you are settling on it, it's actually made you money. But it can go the opposite way, like I mentioned before as well, or it could just track sideways and you get nothing out of it as well. And so you'd be much better off buying something that's got the value or value add potential that you could really then bring into existence by either doing a renovation or a small subdivision or a strata title or a very simple strategy like that. If one gets sold in the building, that can obviously impact and affect your value as well, as I mentioned before. and financial close not met on the project, so you could just waste time. And so what I mean by that is that typically when the developer goes to get funding, then they need to reach a certain level of pre-sales in order to qualify for that funding. Now, if they haven't reached that milestone during their marketing and sales campaign, well then they may need to then just terminate the contracts and then give those contracts back. One other massive risk that has played out in recent years is when a developer is selling into a market that's heating up. There has been many cases that have been published in the media over the years where developers have actually intentionally waited and not started the project so the sunset dates lapse, because there's been so much movement upwards in the price that the developer wants to then terminate the existing contracts of sale off the plan that they had originally sold so that they can then go back to the market and resell them at the higher price. Now imagine that. Imagine that you had been committed to a project for 2 or 3 years. You've been waiting and waiting for one day this product to be delivered, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call and an email from the developer's solicitor to say we're terminating the contract because the sunset date has lapsed. You then get your deposit back, but that's it. You lose any future capital growth that you would have had on that property had you been able to settle on it, and then you've now got to go back into the market and buy either the equivalent or something else where prices have now shifted upwards. So you're effectively having to pay more to get into the market, yet it's been years later down the track. You do not want to be in that sort of position, and this is one of the big reasons why I say just don't buy off the plan. So look, they're the main negatives associated to it. Some of the pros are obviously market growth. So yes, you can have market growth over time. There's often stamp duty savings, which can be linked to these off the plan contracts. So the state revenue office in your particular state may be giving exemptions or full dispensations on stamp duty, which can be appealing, but then you've really got to weigh up whether or not that makes sense to go down the path of all of these potential negatives that could play out. And often the developer is going to hand out lots of concessions or incentives as well. So they might be things like furniture packages, they could be appliance upgrades, it could be upgrades on stone, it could be all sorts of different things. It could be that the developer pays for your stamp duty. There's so many appealing marketing incentives that can be put out there that make these things look really nice and shiny. However, at the end of the day, you've got to look more long-term and say, right, is this the best investment decision that I can be making for my portfolio right now? Or is there other alternatives out there that could potentially play out a bit better? So all in all, I think, you want to try and stay away from off the plan because the negatives, they significantly outweigh any positives that might come of it. This is a real life example. This is Sarah and Chu. When Sarah and Chu came to me, they had bought 2 apartments off the plan. They also had a house and land package in their portfolio, and they were bleeding money every single month. In fact, they'd also geared up their principal place of residence up to 80%, and so they were paying a higher mortgage on their PPR. They were also negatively geared on their apartments and their town and their house and land. So they were also having to pay for other people to live in their property as tenants, right? They were putting a roof over someone else's head and paying for that luxury because they were getting a little bit back on tax, right, through negative gearing. But at the end of the day, they were having to work so hard in their corporate jobs that they had no time left over for their family and their kids, and they just felt like they were spinning wheels getting nowhere fast. And so what we did initially when we started working together was we did a full property audit on all of these properties, and what it came to is that it made more sense for them to sell off these properties, take a small loss, but regroup their capital so that they could then reduce the loan down on their principal place of residence to just ease the pressure, the financial pressure that they were facing every single day. Now, by going through that process, what that did was create them space and time around their situation to then make smarter moves. And so for Sarah and Chu, what that allowed them to do was keep that extra 50% of gearing in their principal place of residence as a redraw facility. And they then went and started partnering with smart investors who were putting together really creative deals with subdivisions, small splitters, little townhouse projects, and they became a money partner to those people and then started to make profits doing it that way. And what that meant is that they were making bigger chunks of capital along the way instead of losing money hand over fist every single month, just trying to maintain this portfolio that wasn't growing and that wasn't netting out any positive cash flow for them either. And so from there, Sarah was able to leave her corporate banking job. She then went and started her own mortgage broking firm and has a much better work-life balance, spends a lot more time with the kids. And of course, they just no longer have this deep financial pressure in their situation that they once had. So you don't want to end up like Sarah and True. You want to try and avoid buying these types of properties that are inevitably going to hold you back. They're going to stop you because you're not going to be able to add value to these properties. You're not going to be able to increase your equity, which is what you need to do in the early days of investing. The number one game should be just build your bank up so that you get to a certain level where you can start to take some of that equity or cash and you can start to invest it in assets that actually pay you an income. So there's more rent coming in than there are costs, and that's how you ultimately replace your income over time. And so stick to doing that. So like I said, land appreciates while buildings depreciate. What would you rather own more of? Of course, you want to be investing in the land because that's the speculative asset that Australians just love to continue investing in and push up prices in. And so the earlier you get in and start buying land content, the better off your investment portfolio is likely to be. I hope that you enjoyed that video. Please like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.